Hey guys, Afi Rule here. I wear what I make and I teach you how to wear what you make. In today's tutorial, I want to talk about digital sewing patterns, specifically multiple page PDF document formats. I think that this format is here to stay because it seems like more and more pattern makers, designers, and sewists are starting to distribute their sewing patterns in this specific format. And so, if you really want to be able to keep up and get access to what I believe is probably the latest and greatest from your favorite designers, you might want to learn this skill set because I don't think that this format is going anywhere. I don't think that the digital format is going anywhere. So, I want to share with you some basics on how to assemble multiple page PDF document sewing patterns. That was a mouthful, but let's just go ahead and get started.
All right, the very first thing that you need to do when working with a PDF downloaded digital sewing pattern is to work with your test page. That's going to look different depending on who sold you the pattern or the designer of the pattern. But this is an example of mine for where you make, okay? I have my test page, which is this 2x2 inch test square with instructions on what I want you to do with this, but it also serves as a legend for the rest of the sewing pattern package. There's only a few things here because this particular pattern is very simple. So when you open this test page, whatever that test page looks like for your sewing pattern package, you want to only print that page. Do not print the actual sewing patterns. If you do that, there's a chance that you could be printing a skewed version of the pattern because you have to ensure that your printer setup is correct. That's the purpose of a test page. So I want to say again, only print the test page. Do not print the sewing pattern at this point. If you want, you can print the instructions as well, but only print the test page and possibly the instructions. All right. And actually, before you print, I want you to make sure that you have your settings correct. Where it says page sizing and handling, you're going to select custom scale and make sure that it's at 100%. If it's not, just type in 100 and you can click out to make sure that it saves. Make sure that this right here is unselected, which it is, so I don't need to select it. Also make sure that you don't have print on both sides of paper selected because you want each individual page to print upright and not back, front and back. I always leave my orientation on auto. Go to page setup and make sure that it is at letter 8.5 inches by 11 inches or US letter, which would also be 8.5 inches by 11 inches. So because mine is already on that setting, I'm going to click cancel. And then once you have these set up, you can hit print. Make sure again that you are only printing that test page. So you want to go to pages and take out the range and leave it at page 1 because my page 1 is the test page. Whatever page the test page is for your sewing pattern package, print that page and that page only. Now, if your particular pattern package does not have a test page, I would recommend reaching out to the person who sold you the pattern and ask them. If you don't see it, ask them if there is a specific location where it might be, or if there's not one that's included in the sewing pattern package, if they can provide instructions on how to make sure that you are printing the correct version of your sewing pattern. So that's it for this portion. You're going to just hit print at this point, print your test page, and then we're going to walk through what to do next. So now that we've got our test page printed out, we're going to take our ruler and physically measure the test square. Like I was saying before, your test page may look different. It just depends on the pattern maker who sold you the pattern. Just measure whatever their test item is by their instructions and ensure that what you measure physically with your ruler matches what is stated on the test item. So as you can see here from our demonstration, our test square measurements are in fact 2 inches by 2 inches per our ruler. So since this is the case, in this scenario, we would go ahead and print our actual sewing patterns, because that means that our printer is capable of printing them to scale at the actual size and dimensions in which they were meant to be printed. If your test square or item does not measure properly, like say that maybe it's too big or it's too small, at this point, if you know that you have put all your printer settings to the right settings, I would recommend reaching out to the person who sold you the pattern. They may be able to provide some additional steps that you can take to make sure that your printer is properly printing not only your test item with your test page, but your actual patterns. And now it's time to print our actual pattern. So I would only recommend, what works for me with this is to print everything. If, like for instance, if you have multiple pieces to print, I normally just print everything and then take it off of the cradle and sort everything out in groups if need be later. That helps me stay organized while I'm working with the pieces, which I find helps me be more successful when I'm trying to actually assemble the pattern pieces.
All right, guys, now it is time to rock and roll. You should have your pattern layout. This particular pattern for Wear What You Make has 2. So I have 2 here. I have my pattern pieces here. And then you also want to make sure that you include your instructions. I do not print my instructions for this pattern because I'm the designer for the pattern and I know how it goes. But if this is your first time making this pattern, or any pattern for that matter that you buy digitally, I want you to make sure that you print the instructions. So the next thing that you will need is some invisible tape. You will need a pencil with an eraser. I like to use pencil because it's easier to correct in case you make mistakes. And I also like to use a clear ruler. My styling design ruler is the clear ruler that I have. You can use any clear ruler. If you don't have a clear ruler and you don't want to invest in one, that's perfectly fine. You can use any ruler. I recommend clear rulers though, because they help you to get more accuracy when you are drawing lines, because you can actually see underneath. As you can see here, you can actually see underneath the ruler. It's better to get accurate lines. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to show you how we are actually going to put this pattern together using our outline guide and our tools. So the first thing that I do when I get my digital sewing pattern packages is I look at the pattern layout. If you don't have one that's included with whatever package you bought, I would recommend reaching out to the designer and ask them if they have recommendations for how to put it together, or maybe if they forgot it in the pattern package, they can send it to you. So this is the one for our Bohemian head wrap. And there's a couple of things that I want to point out. So what you should see is page numbers. So as you can see here, my page numbers are A1 ranging to E3. A represents the row and 1 represents the column. So A1 represents column 1, row 1. A2 represents row 1, column 2. A3 represents row 1, column 3. And then that's going to be the same for row B, row C, D, and E. Now, these square boxes right here represent sheets of 8.5 by 11-inch pieces of paper. So you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 pieces of paper. And then overall, this is what your pattern should look like when you assemble it. Now, these page numbers, you should see them on your sewing pattern pieces on each of them, okay? And you do here. As you can see, I put mine right at the top here. Some digital sewing patterns may have theirs somewhere in here. Just make sure that you look for that. And your legend may tell you, you know, where to find them, what they look like, whether they're alphanumeric or if they're just numerical, okay? So that's how you read this part. And now we're going to go ahead and start assembling our sewing pattern package based off our outline. All right, so the first thing that I want to point out is these markings right here on the side. These are what I call my guiding diamonds that are going to help you know where to put the pieces of the pieces of your pattern together, because that's what you have to do in order to make one accurate sewing pattern from your pieces, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler and I'm going to line my ruler up with all three of these, because there's three on the sides of the paper, right? There's only two on the bottom, and so I'm just going to line up the two on the bottom and on the top, okay? But let's start with three, and I'm going to walk you through how I do this. So starting from top, going to the middle, and to the bottom, I'm going to line this ruler up with all of the points to the best of my ability using the tick marks on my ruler, because as I said before, having a clear ruler helps you to better line up all of the points, okay? And once I feel like I have an accurate line here, I'm going to draw my line from top to bottom. I'm going to do this for all of the sides and the tops and the bottoms of my paper, okay? And I'm going to make sure, when you do this, make sure that you go through and you take your time doing it, because you want to make sure that this is accurate. This is going to be part of making sure that your sewing pattern is accurate. And that is important, because if you don't have an accurate sewing pattern, you're not going to have an accurate garment. All right, so this is what we've done for this first page, all right? So we're going to go through and do this for all of, what I like to do is I like to go through and do this for all of my pieces of paper. This is about how your line should look. So if you see parts like these where the sewing pattern lines are a little bit over the line that you made, that's okay. Just go ahead and erase it and redo it. That's why I like to use pencil, because it's a lot easier to just go back over your mistakes. And that was actually perfect. I'm glad I made that mistake, so that, you know, it's a teachable moment for you guys. So what we're going to do is we're just going to erase this and do this part again. And then we'll have make sure that our line is accurate. I'm just going to do a test run right here. Yeah, that's exactly where we want it. All right, so this is great. All right, so I'm just going to draw that right there. Right there. And so now we're just going to go ahead and do that for all of our pieces here, just in the way that I outlined, okay? All right, so now that we've gone ahead and we've done all of these, I'm going to show you what I do to be able to tape these together, and then I'm going to show you how I tape these together, okay? So if you want, you can use a paper guillotine, if you have one, or just scissors to cut along this line. I personally prefer to fold along the line, because you just may decide, you may look at it and decide that it's not where you want it. You may want to correct it. It's a lot easier to do that if you just fold it. So this is how I fold mine. And this is why I draw lines on the edges, so that, again, accuracy is the key. Accuracy is the key to all digital sewing patterns. And so basically I'm folding the paper back away from the sewing pattern along the line that we drew, okay? And so this is what it should look like once you do that. This is the front, and then this is the back, okay? So because I folded over A1, I'm going to go ahead and place it onto A2 and then line up my diamonds here. Okay. So when you're lining these up, there's a couple of things that you want to pay attention to. You want to make sure that your diamonds look like diamonds, or that, whatever shape they're using looks like the shape that it's supposed to look like. And you want to, if there's 2 or 3, you want to make sure that all of them are as aligned as possible. Now, if you ever get into a situation where something is amiss with one of the diamonds or something like that, you want to make sure that you go by the lines on the pattern. That's what you want to be together. This should align with all of them, but things happen in translation when you're going from the digital sewing pattern sometimes to print. Okay, and so you want to make sure that you are doing your best to align all of these. But if one or more of them don't align, you're going to default to this right here. And you can see mine looks good, and it actually looks, I would say it looks really good, in conjunction with all of our diamonds here. We're going to leave that just like this, and now we're ready to tape. So what I do is I take my tape, and I like to make sure that I have the tape going over the line with the actual sewing pattern. You can put a little bit of tape just right there. And so I've got this, these are my first 2 together, and now you can see that it looks like part of the top left corner of my sewing pattern. So I'm just going to do this again with this one. And then the last set of instructions for this that I will have for you will be when I tape this to the second row, so that you can see what I do with the foldings for the second row, third, fourth, and fifth, etc., in order to join each of the rows together. So I've gone ahead and assembled all of the rows together. You will see rows A through E here. You'll also notice that I have not taped any of the rows together from top to bottom. That's because I wanted to show you this. So the lines across the top here that I drew in, they help to guide me in terms of knowing how to tape each row together, and the bottom pieces too. And they also help me to know where to tape the top row to the bottom row, and the bottom row to the next row, and so on until they're all connected. So now I'm going to show you how I want to connect all of the rows together. Now that each individual row is assembled together, I'm going to show you how I want to do this. All right, so we've got rows A and B. And so what I'm going to do is, you see the lines that I made here that I drew on the top part of this row and the bottom part of this row, because that is where I'm going to connect these 2 pieces. So what I want to do is I want to fold the top piece on the bottom, and then align it with the diamonds and lines and pages, and also the outer lines, just like I showed you before, these outer lines on the actual sewing pattern piece. I'm going to make sure that all of those align as best as I possibly can, make them align before I tape them down. And this is how you do that. Remember, you want to flip your paper over and then fold it to the back, right on the line, as accurate as you can get on the line that you drew. Okay. So you're doing pretty good. And you can always turn your paper over to check it if you need to. You can see that it's on the line there. I'm going to keep folding and fold it all as kind of like one piece together. You know, this part might be kind of tricky because there's two pieces of paper there, but do as best as you can. Just keep folding. Keep folding. And then fold the second piece over it, just like that. And then continue to fold right along the line. And flip over, double check, make sure that we are folded on the line, and we are. Right, so I'm going to take this piece and place it onto the row beneath it, lining up on my diamonds as best as possible. Diamonds here, alignment diamonds. Sounds kind of like a cool thing to say, right? Maybe not. Aligning those up, and also making sure that the actual line on the sewing pattern piece is lined up as well. All right, so now we've got rows A and B, or 1 and 2, together. Well, A and B according to my pattern. And I'm going to go through and go ahead and do the remainder of the rows just in the way that I just showed you. And then I'm going to show you the finished product so that you can see how it works. All right, so as you can see, this is our finished product from rows A through E, columns 1 through 3. Everything is taped together from in between the rows and also the individual columns. And this is what your finished product should look like. You should be able to pick it up as one big piece of paper, kind of like what you would get from a print sewing pattern.
This concludes our tutorial on how to assemble multi-page PDF digital sewing patterns. If you have questions about any part of the process, make sure to leave them below so I can follow up with you. Also, check out our sewing patterns at patterns.wearwhatyoumake.com. If you're already a community member, they are made available inside the community for all community members. If you're not a community member yet, you can join at join.wearwhatyoumake.com. That's all for now. See you next time.